Santham Academy. Welcome to Digital Kaksha. To get updates on new videos, click the subscribe button and the bell icon.
Welcome back, students. Now let us study what is the relevance of this ASEAN to India. The very objective of studying this chapter is that what is our benefit in such organizations and associations. So we need to study what type of relations we have with ASEAN. Though India is not a part of ASEAN, it has being a neighboring country, being a big landmass and a very big economy in the region, it is bound to have some relations with its neighboring countries. So with the help of ASEAN, it has in recent years developed relationship with these countries. Because ASEAN is a growing economy, in economic strength, ASEAN is very much relevant to the countries like India and China, because these countries taken together is a big market for India also. Okay. Being a developed country comparatively, it can provide help to these nations and it can derive benefits of investment there, and it can get the benefit of resources from these countries also. So they are very much relevant nowadays for India. India has signed agreements with 2 members of ASEAN. There are trade related agreements, there are other matters of agreement on security and peace with Singapore and Thailand. These are the important members of ASEAN, Singapore and Thailand. And we have a lot of trade relations. Tourism sector is very much interdependent. Both the countries' tourism sector is interdependent on each other. Then this is the only forum where the Asian countries, they can sit together, have a forum and have discussion about major economic related policies and matters of international peace, security and cooperation among them, to make the region more prosperous, to speed up the economic growth of this region, and to provide collective security to the region from the foreign powers, from the other power blocks. This association, this collaboration, this relation with India is very necessary for them, and for us also it is necessary to have a strong hold over this region so that no other power can take advantage of the situation and can prove to be disadvantageous to us in near future. So for not allowing other developed countries like China and Japan to seize the opportunity of having the benefit of these nations, we need to help, we need to extend a helping hand, and we need to cooperate with these nations to have a strategically good relations with them. Hope you understood this topic very well. Further we'll study the another power blocks of the region, that is China. Welcome back, students. Now let us move our area of study to another powerful country of the region. In fact, it is emerging as a powerful country at the world level also, China. China, the fastest growing economy. China facing a big challenge to the US in the near future. China trying to dominate in the South Pacific region. Let us study what is the strength that China is projected to become a most powerful country of the world. China has been the fastest growing economy since it has started some reforms. It has began with some reforms in agriculture, reforms in state control and investment, privatization in agriculture, state control in the economy, privatization of industries. In this way, step by step, it has emerged as a powerful country now. It is projected that it would overtake United States of America by the year 2040 due to its fast rate of growth and a big economy. It is projected that it would be the next superpower of the world. Its integration in the region, that is in the Asian region, makes it a driver of East Asian growth. It is popularly called as the driver of East Asian growth. That means for the growth of East Asian countries. This make it a very influential country in the region. Then it has lot of other advantages with itself. Let us see. It is a very large economy, already very big economy. It has enormous population, second largest population in the world. Biggest landmass, very not the biggest one, but quite a big landmass, even bigger than that of India. Then its resources, lot of resources it has. Its locational advantage in the region. It is located in such a way that very easily it can have interaction, trade relation with the neighboring countries of South Asia as well as East Asia as well as North Asia and India. It lies in the world famous Silk Route, which had been historically very important for international trade since ages. So that advantage, locational advantage it has, that it can interact with any country of the world very easily compared to some other developed countries. Then its political influence, due to its dominance, its economy, its power, its technological advancement, it has a political advantage also. It can influence the politics of the world also. It is one of the member of the UN Security Council enjoying veto power. This veto power gives it a very dominant position at the World Forum also. No decision can be taken by the permanent members of the UN Security Council without the agreement of China. So that is the biggest advantage that China is enjoying at the UN Security Council. Then all these influences make it a very influential country in the region as well as in the world. So due to these advantages that China is enjoying, it has a very great significant influence in the particular region, in the whole of China, as well as it has its influence in the rest of the world also. Now children, let us study the growth journey of China. China formed the People's Republic of China in 1949. 1949 is set up a republican form of government. During that time, economy was based on the Soviet model. Soviet model means a very controlled economy, state controlled economy with no foreign investment, no multinational companies, no privatization. Everything was in the hands of the government. That was the model beneficial for the native people for that time. Okay. Under Mao, such arrangement was made. There were state-owned heavy industries. Heavy industries were not privatized, they were owned by the government. They have replaced imports with domestic goods. They have increased their production, they have investment in industries and increased the production, and they have reduced the dependence on other countries. They have replaced the imports with the goods produced in their own market. Then the use of resources, as we know that China has plenty of natural resources. So the use of resources had been very well done for the economic growth of the nation. And the employment and education of the people was also done very well by the use of these resources. Whatever revenue they generate by the resources, by selling it, by producing from it, whatever value they generated, this income was spent on human development also. So that way the society also was quite educated. They have achieved the growth rate of 5 to 6%, that is significantly high in such times when even the developed countries are having the growth rate of 1 to 3% or 0 to 2% per annum is the growth rate of, you can say, USA, England, Canada. Such developed countries, their growth rate has now reached to a stagnant position. And in such times, China is the fastest growing economy. Okay, its GDP account to 5 to 6% annually. In the 1970s, China has established some good relations with USA. Earlier it was not having much relation with USA, and it has kept its economy closed from the rest of the world. But now slowly and gradually it is interacting with the capitalist countries like USA. And with this growing relation with USA, it has modernized certain sectors of its economy. It has modernized agriculture, it has modernized industries, okay. It has made use of science and technology and military. In the advancement of all these spheres, agriculture, industry, science and technology and military, it has advanced a lot with the modernization policy. By the 1978, it announced an open door policy. Open door policy means opening the economy for the world countries and companies, the multinational companies, to allow investment in China. So that open door policy allowed other countries, USA and other countries, to invest in their country. And with that, it has increased its production. It has increased its production by welcoming investment from abroad, by purchasing technology from other developed countries, and in a way increasing its production and further generating huge revenues from this, and ultimately developing the nation in the world level. Let us further study what all things have been contributing to the development of China. China follows its own path of market-based economy. Its economy is nowadays slowly and gradually becoming market-based, as against how it was earlier, which was state-controlled economy. Now it has become an open economy. China did not go for the shock therapy as the other Russian countries has gone. Shock therapy, that means all of a sudden you shift from a state controlled economy to the market based economy. Under shock therapy, all of a sudden you allow foreign investment, you allow capitalism in your country, you allow privatization in the country, and the state loses all its control over the economic activities, and everything is left open to the world market. In such circumstances, the local producers as well as the general public, especially the laborers, they face very severe times, very hard times. So China did not go for this type of shock therapy. It adopted a step-by-step measure. As the country is advancing, as the local production is becoming more competitive in the market of the world, as the employment is ensured in the country itself, in the same pace, slowly and gradually, it is welcoming foreign investment and capitalism in the country. and still it takes hold of some critical economic activities into its own control. It has taken major steps for improvement of its economy. In 1982, it has taken a step of privatization of agriculture. Its agriculture had been privatized, and with that there were more investment in agriculture sector, so the revenue generation in agriculture increased and the benefit of it was shared with the farmer communities of the country. So now slowly and gradually the farmers would be becoming richer. In 1998, another policy of privatization was done. In some selective industries, privatization was done. So in 1998, privatization of industries had been another step towards economic growth of the country. Then the trade barriers were removed, but removed only in the special economic zones. Trade barriers were not removed in the whole country, but only where the special economic zones were set up, where the foreign investment was welcomed, where the multinational companies were allowed to set up their production centers. In those spheres, in those areas only, the trade barriers were removed, but for the rest of the sectors there were still trade barriers to protect the domestic producers and to protect the employment of the local people. Further, the rural development had been there due to the privatization of agriculture. Now the farmers are having some additional savings because their income have increased, their savings have also increased. With this savings, now rural industrialization also starts. That means in rural areas, larger farmers diversify their occupation and start setting up small, medium and large scale industries also. This improved the local, you can say the rural areas economic status also. The SEZs led to the rise of foreign trade. When we open up special economic zones in our country, then we are exposed to the foreign nations. So we get a lot of help from the multinational companies. Most important destination of the foreign investment was now the China, because it ensured, it guaranteed higher growth rate as compared to the other developed countries of Europe. Then large foreign exchange reserves were there with China, and this foreign exchange reserves made it strong enough to invest in other countries also, and that way generate income from other countries. So that way its economy would develop. It can be now becoming more and more influential in the world market. Also another step, very big step in becoming influential in the world market was China's accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001. In 2001, China also became the member of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. This was a big step. Now it is ready to compete in an international market and compete with the most developed countries of the world also. Now students, we know that no country has unlimited powers. There is a limitation to the powers of somebody. There are certain weaknesses of every person, every country, every organization. In the same sequence, China also faces certain challenges, certain weaknesses. Let us study what weaknesses China faces. Underemployment has risen to a great extent in China. In the year 2005, the underemployment has been estimated to be more than 100 million people seeking for job. More than 100 million people were in search of job. When we talk about females, the condition of female is no good. Female unemployment and work conditions are very bad as the 19th and 20th century Europe. Corruption is at its height. In the government mechanism, there is lot of corruption, and due to that lot of wastage of funds is there, and the lot of imbalance in the terms of development of the people is seen in China. There is imbalance of development of the people of China. There is economic inequality between rural and urban population. At one side, the urban population are growing at a very fast rate, but the rural population continues to be under poor living condition. And the coastal inland population also suffer disparity of economic growth. The coastal regions, the coastal states are much more prosperous than the regions of inland areas. China also faces disputes with Japan, USA, the ASEAN organization, and the neighboring country newly emerging economy of India. So it has also certain countries and organizations with which it is facing lot of stiff competition. So in a way, there are possibilities of limitation on the hegemony of China.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like, share and subscribe for more.